Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll have a couple more people trickle in from wherever lovely, warm place they are hopefully residing at the moment, but we will dive in because we have a lot to cover in today's session with Coach Hayley. If you are new and this is your first Amo La Vida webinar, let me know in the chat. Would love to hear if you're new or if you're a client, let us know either way. If I haven't met you yet and you are new to our community, welcome. Yay, Rhonda, welcome. My name is Nicole. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Amo La Vida, ALV. So welcome to our little community. We're so happy that you're here, and we hope you get a ton out of this next hour or so that we have together. I will pass it over to Hayley to talk about feedback culture very briefly in a minute, but I want to first let you know who we are, who Amo La Vida is. So we are a career leadership, life, and health coaching company based here in Chicago, but our coaches are all spread out throughout the country. Amo La Vida means love life, and that is what we help people do through our coaching. And really, we built this organization with the fundamental belief that you shouldn't have to wait until you get home from work to start enjoying your life. And so that really is what our coaching is all about, coming at that from a number of ways that are all interconnected. Your health is related to your career, is related to your relationships, is related to your work. And so really wanting to make sure that you as a whole human being have the tools and habits and resources that you need to be healthy and happy in all of those different domains and aspects of your life. Specifically talking about work, we used to say, you may have heard the expression, people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And then more recently, you may have heard people don't quit bosses, they quit cultures. And what we know through our work is people quit all three. And so what we want to try to do is help you find the right job for you. And so we coach individuals to find the right career path for them. And then we also coach within organizations where we're helping leaders and organizations develop those cultures that have that supportive and feedback environment to help people do their best work. And so feedback is a critical component of that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But we are happy to support leaders and organizations to develop cultures in whatever goals they have to help create those really healthy, happy workplaces. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Hayley. Feel free to ask your questions throughout. I will try my best to field those to her throughout the presentation, but there will also be time for questions at the end. And then I'm also going to drop a link in here and I will share it again at the end. If you are interested in speaking with us about your organization or about you yourself as a leader, please feel free to click on this link, give us a little bit of info and book some time with us. And we're happy to have a one-on-one chat and start to set some strategy for you. So I'll paste that now in just a second and I will pass it over to our wonderful leadership coach, Hayley.
Thanks so much for the warm welcome, Nicole, and thanks for being here today. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar today. We're going to spend some time talking about creating a feedback culture, and feedback has become so important and a really important topic today throughout organizations. So we're going to spend some time talking about that today and why it's important and how it can benefit you and how you can improve upon that and get some tips or pointers to keep on going. So I am a leadership coach here at Amo La Vida. And we have a wonderful, wonderful team of coaches. So if you are already a part of our family, welcome, good to see you again. If you aren't, please take note of what we talk about today and we'd love to have you join. We have some new people, so please keep sharing with us where you're from. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and I became a leadership coach because I really, really love the whole leadership aspect. I've worked in corporate for over 20 plus years, and being able to take my experiences and being able to help my clients along their leadership journey is something that I absolutely love and is so close to my heart. So I'm really, really happy to be able to be here to talk about feedback today in organizations. And let's connect. Let's reach out to each other. Here's my email. Feel free if any questions come up today, if you're interested in coaching or want more information or something I said resonated with you, or you have more questions about it, or something comes up later when you're thinking about it later, definitely send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. We're happy to make more connections and to continue to grow our networks and help each other as we go through this journey together. So you've been sharing in the chat where you're from. Please, as you continue to come in, people are still joining. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're getting some new people, Chicago, California, and Dallas. We're really having a really wide selection of people today. So I'm so happy to have such a wide audience. Some international folks too, so great. So come on in and get comfortable. And yes, I don't know what the weather's like there, but if it's this time of year, if it's cold, I hope you're snuggled up with a blanket and ready for some good information. And also, if you are ALV member, definitely tell us that. I know you're new, so definitely if you're new, we're so happy to have you here. And if you people keep coming in, please definitely tell us where you are. If you're snuggled up by the fire, got some cocoa, got some water, and we're going to get started. So why are we here today? So we're going to talk about a feedback and what that relationship looks like. A lot of times, most of the time when we hear that word feedback, we probably get a negative feeling or a negative thought, but we're going to talk about some positive ways that we can make feedback a really positive thing and how you can identify or create an ideal feedback culture for your organization. And then we're going to look at some frameworks. It's great to talk about it. And we're going to see some frameworks that are out there that some companies are currently using, and also maybe give you some ideas of how you can take some of those other frameworks and either implement those at your company with your team, or create something new, or get some fresh ideas on how to create a culture for your company. And then, of course, my favorite part is how to put it into action, right? We learn so many great things, have so many great tips. What are we going to do with it? So we're going to talk about how you can prepare and then implement these feedback tips to make a great culture at your organization. So just a little bit of logistics. Our session today will definitely be recorded and sent out. So don't worry if you're taking notes or you missed something, or the dog barked, or you had to rush to the bathroom, or kids interrupted or anything like that. We'll be able to send that back out, so you'll be able to catch anything you might have missed, or to go back and take some more information from what we talk about. If this is your first time enrolling in our event, welcome again. We also have a lot of wonderful trainings lined up this year. So please sign up so you can make sure you get notified of all the wonderful things we have going on this year. It's a new year and we're ready to share and bring you all in for all the wonderful information that we're going to share. And then also too, as we go through the presentation, you may start thinking, this would be great. I would really love to work on my personal development or to work on this for our team. So how can we do that? We're here to help you as well have that conversation if you want to gain more information or use coaching or leadership or group coaching for your own personal development for you or your team. So we're here to help you with that as well. And you can always definitely schedule a consult to have more information, to learn more and what's available and how we can work together. So this is one of my favorite little memes. I love people. We've all probably know someone or worked with somebody that says, I'm always open to feedback. And then as soon as you give it, they get defensive. I don't want to hear that, right? So this is my little joke. But we're going to talk about today how we can be open to feedback and we don't have to be defensive about it. And how we can benefit, even if it may not be meaningful at that moment, but what we can do with it for later. That's one of my favorite little tidbits. So I'll share that a little later as we get into the presentation. So first, we're going to talk about understanding our relationship with feedback. Some people may say a love or hate relationship, but we'll see what it's like for you. So the first question that comes to mind, I want you to just think about for a second and definitely drop your answers in the chat. When it comes to feedback, what do I do well? So think about that and go ahead and share with us what you think you do well as it relates to feedback. I know for myself, I wasn't always a fan of feedback, but when I started thinking about it, I like leading with positivity. That's really good. I found that that's so helpful when I'm able to find something positive. And this is going to come up again when we get into some of the frameworks about positivity. But what do you do well when it comes to feedback? I see listen. Yes, that's very vital, very important. Yes. I hear you, Rhonda. I'm sure we could all definitely relate to that. Yes, listening again. Yes, asking for it. That's a great one. And I know many of us sometimes we don't ask for feedback. We're going to get into that as well. Yes, seeking greater understanding. These are amazing ones. You guys are experts already. You are experts. Oh, Yes, that's a good one too. Even if you are defensive in the beginning, taking it to heart and making those changes. Yes, yes. Positive coaching, improvement areas. Great. These were wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Those are really great. Now let's look at the other side of it. Now, when it comes to feedback, what do you feel like you struggle with? What comes to mind to that? I know it used to be for me when I thought about it. I sometimes struggled if the person giving the feedback, if I felt that they didn't, what they were giving me feedback on, they weren't doing it themselves. So I had a defensiveness that we saw in the kind of the beginning is, why are they giving me feedback? They're not doing it. So I used to struggle with that. Yes, following through and making changes. That's a really big one. The sandwich method. I'm glad somebody brought that up. Yes, that's that sandwich method. Not doing that. Yes, talking myself out of giving it. We're going to talk about how we can make sure that we don't do that, because we may psych ourselves up and we're like, yeah, I'm going to go in tomorrow. I'm going to have that feedback conversation. I have a meeting set up, and then, maybe for whatever reason we may cancel that meeting, or if we were going to set up a meeting, maybe we don't. Confrontation, yes, that's a big one. A lot of individuals don't like confrontation, and so they refrain from giving that feedback. I like that one. Knowing when to stop talking. Yeah. So sometimes we just keep on going, even though we over explain, right? And so then our message can get lost. Yes, positive vibes. I like that too. Right. And then our delivery. I think that's one that a lot of people mention as well, having it delivered. Ooh, difficult, giving it to a difficult employee. That's a really area that it really a lot struggle with. I have a client that I'm currently working with, and she's a leader, and she's in a position where she has an employee that is underperforming. And she's had conversations in the past with this individual, and they haven't taken the feedback well. It's been a defensive type reaction to it. So we're coaching now, and I'm helping her to come up with the strategy of how she can try to reach that employee with the feedback and other ideas around that, because that can be a tricky area when you have where the person isn't taking it. So yes, coming from a positive place, I love that. Positivity and knowing, and that's something we're gonna definitely talk about. Oh, this was wonderful. This really, really great answers and comments. So thank you for sharing those. These were great. So you all mentioned a lot of these in your comments about why we're talking about why is it so hard, right? Somebody mentioned confrontation that comes up again. We want to be liked, right? We don't want people not to like us. We want to be nice, right? We work with different ones. We want to get along with our team. We want to get along with our leader. If we're a leader, we want our teams to, prosper. We want them to grow. So it can be, and we want to be liked. And then it's just plain awkward, right? Having to tell somebody something that may not be positive. It's hard because we don't know, is that person going to be defensive? How are they going to respond? If we have a relationship with that person, how's it going to affect it, right? That all affects that. And then also, yes. And I see a question in the chat about how do you do that when they're a peer? That's a very good question. I actually had a client that had to give feedback to a peer, and it's doing it in a positive nature, but also coming from a place of where they know that you care about them, and you know that you're there to help and assist. So a lot of it has to do with, and we'll definitely get into this a little deeper when we talk about the frameworks of our intentions and being clear and giving clear examples. And so we know that, especially if it's a peer and we're giving feedback to someone about their work, whether we are a leader or a peer, that it's difficult, right? It is difficult. But when we come from a place of positivity, a place of caring, and a place of helping them to improve, it can really make a difference. And when we give the specific examples or point out to them the specific examples, or also too, how we end it, how we can either offer the help them be accountable, set up an action plan, all those things help feedback be easier to take. And they know that it's coming from a place, it isn't just a personal nitpick, but something that we show them the impact on them, the impact on the organization, the impact on the team. And a lot of times when we're able to see that big picture and take ourselves out of just our lens, it really makes a difference. So let's talk about what happens when we do feedback right. I'm sure you can definitely think of some experience, some ideas or thoughts about what happens when we do right. If you've been in an experience where you've received positive feedback or constructive feedback, how did you feel when you felt it was done out of love or out of positivity? You probably felt good about it, even if it was constructive and you had to, change some things. When we do it right, you see the benefits. One benefit that I really love, here are some listed. We save time, right? If we notice a mistake or we know something is not done correctly, if we don't give that feedback, that person could keep on doing it incorrectly. And down the line, that could affect the entire team, right? If we reported, for instance, we're in finance and you're reporting out numbers, and maybe you notice that the person who's creating that, maybe they need to watch something, maybe their formulas are off, or you notice, after a couple of times, some things need to be changed. By giving them that feedback, they're able to make those changes, because guess what? In a situation like that, it could reflect on the whole team, or maybe everybody has to go back. Maybe if you're in IT or tech, or you're working on a project together, and every different departments have different pieces, or different people have different things that they're working on. If something isn't done the right way from the beginning, or you noticed it, it saves a lot of work and overdoing. So less mistakes and less rework, definitely. I like the creativity. We're all creative. We all think differently. So when we're able to share with each other and have different thoughts about that, think about the environment, the culture that it builds when you have that creativity from so many different people. I know we've all maybe have worked at an organization or a company where people may have been there a long time, and you may find that those people generally all may tend to think the same way. And so when you're able to have that feedback, have those different conversations with different individuals, you get different ideas, different creativity comes about. And think about how the team prospers. And then again, in effect, how that affects the organization. And also too, it builds a trust bank. When we trust each other, we trust our organization, the people we work with, our leader, it builds such an amazing culture, such a wonderful environment to work with. Because when we know that our leader has our back, our team, our coworkers have our back, we're all in it together, it fosters a really great environment, as opposed to the opposite, when we may feel that we don't have that support or trust and we can't give that feedback. So that's really good. So I hope some of these resonate with you as you see what happens when you do it right. So let's talk about creating our feedback culture. As Nicole mentioned, culture is becoming so important in organizations today. I think back in the day when you look for a job, we all have our list of what we want, right? And now one of the common questions that a lot of people ask when they go on interviews is, tell me, what is your company culture like? Describe it to me. What is it like? I want to know. That's a big decision maker sometimes when it comes to whether I decide to work at this organization, or if I decide to stay here, or if I want to continue in my career here. That has a lot to do with it. So let's see how we can create that culture. Think about this question. When you think about your company, what are some characteristics of an ideal feedback culture? Think about that for a minute and give some thought to it. Go ahead and share in the chat what comes to mind when you think about that, your ideal feedback culture. I know for me, one word that pops up is definitely trust. I want trust. I was speaking with the client about their company culture yesterday, actually, and she described hers as being wholesome. And I thought, I hadn't heard that word in a while, right? Wholesome. No, the many things today we look around, we don't hear that word or see wholesome things, but really having that wholesome, clean, collaborative feedback. Yes, honesty. Yes, engaged. Ooh, that's a big one. That's a good one. Transparency. Oh my goodness. Yes, that's so important. Psychological safety. We're going to talk about that a little bit later too. That's really important too. I was reading an article last week, and it's talking about how employees, they really value that psychological safety in their work. Growth mindset. Yes, yes, yes. You're after my own heart with that comment. I love talking about the growth mindset. Yes, yes, yes. Problems and focusing on the problems and solutions. Sometimes we see that with teams and organizations and leaders, you can get so caught up in the problem becomes a problem, and you're not able to find a solution. So that's really important. Not non-judgmental. Yes, yes, that's important too. No, nobody wants to feel judged, right? We all want to be accepted. We all want to be included when we're in our organizations that we work with. Yes, yes. Very, very good. I love those characters. We have a great week to put all those together. We have like the best feedback culture right now. Like I love it. So we're gonna implement those and talk about those, and we're gonna have that with our little community right now. So we're gonna look at some feedback frameworks. You may be familiar with some of these as I bring them up, or maybe new to you. So let's see. One that's really popular, a lot of people are familiar with, is Netflix feedback framework, and they call it the 4 A's. So they have 2 that are related to giving the feedback, and they have 2 related to receiving the feedback. So when we think about giving feedback, right? What the first thing that they talk about is aiming to assist. And I really like this because when you think about when you're giving that feedback, what is my goal? What do I want to accomplish? I hope not, but obviously we're not going there to tear the person down, right? We want to build them up. We want them to feel good about what we're telling them. So they have it as aim to assist, right? You want to be, as we talked about again, we see positive. We want to bring that positive nature, positive intent, and we want it to be helpful to the individual that we're speaking with. Actionable, right? We want what we're getting ready to share with someone. If you're a leader and you're sharing this with your team, you're sharing this with your direct reports, you're not just sitting there having a conversation with them just to blow steam. You really want to help them. You want them to have actionable steps or suggestions of how they can change or how they can fix or take in the feedback you're giving. And then also with receiving feedback now, let's go to the other end. So now let's imagine you're that person receiving the feedback. So you want to be appreciative, right? You don't want to become defensive because of that person. It probably took a lot for them to come have that conversation, or it took, they probably have balls and nerves, or stomach's probably like the knots, and they're having to give this conversation. And by having an appreciative mindset, appreciative tone, that really helps them as well. And then also, I know we're going to love this one, accept or discard. People give feedback all the time. Do we have to accept? No, we don't, right? It's up to you whether you choose to accept it or discard it. But along with that is just letting the person know, I appreciate that. And then you can take it and internalize it or do whatever you would like to do with it. So that's the Netflix framework. Another one that you may have heard of or be familiar with is the WISE feedback model. I like this one. It talks about high expectations. So how would we do that? So it says that first of all, you state what the expectation is. Then you give specific feedback that's actionable on how to do it. And then you express confidence in that person. And I really like that piece of it, expressing that confidence, because if someone's hearing something maybe that they need to work on or an area that they need to improve upon, that can kind of make us feel a little down. Our ego can come down a little bit, or, our feelings come into play, and we may not feel that, oh, I can't believe I did that, or I didn't do that mistake, or I wish I had done that. So we may feel not the best. But when that person, as a leader, if you're giving that feedback, or if you're a peer giving it to someone, when you express confidence in that person, it really helps them to feel better about it, and even makes them determined or motivated to improve or put those steps into play. So think about, when you're talking to someone, it could be something like, hey, Sally, I'm providing you some feedback today because, I know you can do better. I've seen you do better. It's no question in my mind. The presentation that you did last week to the team, it lacked a little bit of clarity, and it left us wondering how we were going to take action. So I was thinking that maybe perhaps in the future, maybe if you added just maybe a summary slide at the end, or some action steps, like a slide with that at the end of your slide deck, that would really help bring home that point. And then it would be really clear what the purpose of what your point, what you wanted us to get from that. And you know what? I know you can wow us because the presentation was absolutely amazing. I got so much from it. I just wasn't clear what our next steps were. So I look forward to seeing how you can, you will use this clarity in your workshop next week. And if you have any questions, please, I'm always here. Please feel free to come run it by me. I don't mind at all. How'd that sound? Think Sally would take that feedback coming from me? Think so? I hope she would. But again, it's setting that expectation. It's giving actionable steps and then giving that confidence that they can do it. So that's the WISE model. Now, this is one of my favorites. This is the 5-step framework. And this one can really be used really for any topic that's being given, whether it's constructive or positive feedback. So the one that we talked about, I think I hit on this just a little bit earlier, but really reiterating their identity. And what does that mean? It means letting the person know that it's not personal, right? You're able to take time and really look at their character, and it's not malicious intent. Like, I'm not coming after you, I'm not attacking you, but you're letting them know, I understand this, I see it in you. So it may sound something like, hey, Michelle, I know how important quality work is to you. What did I do there? I let her know up front that I recognize her quality of work. That's important to her. So again, she's going to listen. She's going to open up instead of close. Or, hey, Mike, I know you always prioritize customer service. Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, definitely. Right. I got his attention. He's open. I'm thinking about something that's important to him, his identity. Or, hey, Heather, I can't imagine how much pressure you're under right now trying to balance work and plan a wedding. It can be so much. I remember when I was going through that. Again, relatable. I'm picking out something that I noticed already about her. And this is really important because it really reiterates that person's identity and it puts them at ease, right? They feel comfortable. We're coming to them talking about something that means something to them. So they're open. And that's how you can reiterate identity. Number 2, provide context. I think I hit on this earlier too. So we're going to talk about some of the things we mentioned earlier. But when we're specific, I don't know if anyone has ever done like an assessment or a 360 assessment or had their peers rate them in an assessment before. And a lot of times, sometimes it's just qualitative, sometimes quantitative, where we're able to actually have those we get the comments. And a lot of times in those comments, they can be generic. And so the person that's reading it may say, I wish I had specific examples. But when that person, like if I'm reviewing a 360 with the client, and when they have those specific examples that the rater included in that assessment, it's so helpful. It really helps the person be able to take and digest, like bite-sized little pieces. If we're eating a steak, we don't take that whole steak in our mouth at one time, right? We cut it into small pieces so we can digest it. So when we provide context to what we're giving feedback on, it's so important. We're not making those general statements. It's not like those, you always or you never, we may see TV shows and the 2 couples are fighting and you always do this. And then the other person immediately shuts down, right? Because it's something about that you always or that you never. And the person immediately thinks, no, I don't. And then the balls go up, right? So when we avoid those type of phrases, the person doesn't feel that their character is being attacked. And so we can say something like, if it may sound like, Jill, in your last PowerPoint presentation. So again, I'm not just saying, when you give presentations, no, specifically her last presentation. So then her mind goes to that presentation. She's probably thinking, oh yeah, I did that last week. And she starts thinking about that particular one. Or if I'm talking to Bill, in that email you sent this morning to the client, again, specific. If I just would have said, oh, your emails that you always send, what emails are you talking about? So that person's mind is going to think about all these other things instead of that specific one.
Hey, Hayley, before you move on, Whitney had a great question that I think was referring to the point about reiterating their identity. How do you do that if the person's pretty closed off or you don't know a lot about them? How do you take that step?
Oh, great question. Thanks for bringing that up. That can be a little bit difficult if you don't know. Sometimes it may be with their identity. You think about maybe something in their work that you look at. So maybe if you notice, for instance, if it is a presentation, maybe they used, I don't know, maybe a certain color font. I'll use that as an example. Or their style. Maybe it's their style of communication. Things like that you maybe can pick up on from their work style if you don't know them. And then that's a very, very good question, because being virtual right now, especially if new people started, we may not be as familiar with them about their identity and things like that. So that is a really good question. So looking for little things, and even if we are, well, most of us are virtual, notice maybe things in the background or things that may have shared and doing things like that. And sometimes it just really does. I know that's a great point that someone brought in the chat too, about it depends on the person. Kind of understanding their under how they are can maybe make it a situation where you may not be the person to give them that feedback. Now, if you are their leader, then that does, you have to find trying to discover ways to give them that feedback. If it's a peer, then maybe it is someone else that gives them that feedback. Or maybe if it's you're their leader, finding, maybe it's a group conversation. It depends on what it is. If it's something that's kind of broad that can be talked about, or if you have one-on-ones are kind of a great way to have those conversations. I know with my clients, we talk about their one-on-ones if they're leaders and they have teams that they manage. And one thing that we've come up with that a lot of my clients have implemented these last few months is taking one of their one-on-ones and devoting it to feedback. And for those, and now I just thought about something, one of my clients does have that. They have a new employee they don't know a lot about. And so she was a little hesitant of giving that person feedback. But I told her in her one-on-ones, she started to just kind of get to know the person a little bit more, to find out a little bit about them, what motivated them as far as their work, asking them questions. And then in that one-on-one too, you can then have that conversation with them. So if it's not in front of other people, or having that makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. So I hope that helps. So let's see, we were, I think, talking about describing behavior. I think that's where we were at. So again, as we talked about providing the context, then particularly talking about that behavior. If, for instance, in the presentation, you had to give someone feedback about, if maybe they had spelling errors or maybe their calculations were a little off, you could say, you had a number of spelling and grammatical errors. That's being, again, the behavior. Or you did a phenomenal job of addressing that concern and providing that solution quickly. We're able to definitely describe it. And it helps, again, that person to bring that together. And then explaining the impact, letting them know how that behavior impacted either them, the team, the organization. Those help. So for instance, if we had the example of the person that they had their presentation and maybe they had some grammatical errors and some of their calculations were off. When you speak to that person and provide that feedback, you can say, that was a great presentation. I just wanted to share that we know that since those presentations are viewed by the board, just simple errors can really cause them to question the quality of our work, and then also the validity of our calculations. So see, it helps them to see how it could just be a misspelled word, but because of who our audience is and the impact it can have, it helps them to kind of see why it's important or why we're bringing it, like we're not just nitpicking. And then 5, providing suggestions for the future. I love this part because it really helps the person to appreciate. You want them to succeed. You want them to go further. And it helps them to see how they can change in the future or adapt. So for instance, if the person that created let's say Michelle, she created that presentation and it had a couple of errors in it. You could say, hey, Michelle, maybe for next week's presentation, you can go see Mandy or Phil and maybe have them do a quick peer review and they can just double check. Because you know what? It's so easy to overlook things. A fresh pair of eyes could really help. I know I had done a presentation and my last name is Dennis and it said Venice. And I promise you, I looked at that presentation like 10 times and I never caught that my last name was Venice. But, I'm like, maybe I need to get some thicker glasses so I can see that. But it's sometimes just something simple like that. And the person's like, oh, that would be great. And then you could even tell in this example, you know what, even that would be a great idea. We could implement that for the team. If we have a presentation, maybe having the team or one or two people take turns of reviewing each other's work. This is a second set of pair of fresh eyes. How do you think about that? Right? It makes it easier. And I feel like, oh, they want to help. And then we could do this for the team. And then this would be great. Yes, exactly. So I like that. Another feedback model this is a really easy one. I like this one because it's fast, easy, and you have a two-way street of communication going on. And it's the quick feedback framework. So the manager asks the question, what went well, right? So that fosters communication. So then if we're in a team meeting and I'm the leader, what do you think went well with that presentation we gave last week to the department heads? How do you think they thought? Get the feedback, people share. Then the manager states, what went well. So it's a back and forth. It's a sharing of communication. What could have been better? Again, we get feedback. What could have been, then the manager states what could have been better. This is one method that a couple of my clients use with their teams, and it works so well. They use, one client particularly that comes to mind, use it when they're doing one-on-ones with their team. And they do it once a month. And they use that time to say, what went well this month for you? Are there ways that I could have supported you more this month? Opens up communication, opens up safety, lets the employee or your team or your direct report know you're interested in them. You're interested in giving that feedback and listening and seeing how we can work together. So that's another one that is I really like. So now,
Hayley, we have a couple really good questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to keep going through the content or if you
no, go ahead. Let's take them.
Okay, let's do it. Teresa asked a really interesting question, which is about if there's someone that you manage and a third party brings feedback to you about that individual, like I noticed that your direct report did XYZ, how do you pass that information along in a way that doesn't throw that other person under the bus or create conflict between now your direct report and that person?
That's a good one. Yes. I actually had a client deal with this issue. They as a manager had someone else from another department bring them feedback. And it was funny because she knew that if she gave that information the way it came to her, to that employee, they would probably figure out who said it. And then she knew that would create animosity in between the other teams that they work with, or that particular person that gave that feedback work with. She decided to do it as kind of a team exercise. So that person, or in a team meeting, so it wasn't that person that she necessarily went to and pinpointed it. She wanted to see if the person can get the hint or get the point from a team meeting. It actually came up very successful. The person, she used the information that she got from somebody else and used it as a learning opportunity for the team to learn from. So she brought it as she was sharing that for everybody on how the whole team could improve. And that person that the particular feedback was for, she was able then to go ahead. She recognized, she never came to her and said, I felt like you were talking to me. And it actually, that feedback ended up benefiting the entire team. So sometimes you can do it that way. And I saw that that's been beneficial. If you can even rephrase it or reframe it, or use maybe not that specific example, but maybe use an example similar to how you have to approach that person with it. And then also knowing too, that the person that you're talking with, or the person that you're coaching or talking this over with, knowing them too. I think someone had brought this up in the chat earlier about knowing that person, if you are their leader or you're working with them, and kind of knowing their personality and how they'll respond to what you're giving. So thinking about that again, keeping in mind that person, and then reframing it, or also taking it as a learning example or a learning point for the whole team. So I hope that helps.
I love that idea about sharing it with the whole team. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth had a great question as well. She said, what about the flip side where a company is asking for feedback from employees, but the staff is hesitant to provide that feedback?
Those good goal company surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think a lot of times with those, employees are definitely sometimes hesitant, especially if if they feel like, for instance, say the company does have a not so good feedback culture and they're asking those questions, people don't want to be identified. I know they say, people always say, well, I know it says anonymous, but I don't feel like giving that. You might start with, in those situations, starting at the team level with that. And so instead of doing the whole company wide, maybe have the leaders of each organization or each area, have them gather feedback from their teams. Especially the employees may feel more comfortable talking to their leaders than doing a whole survey sometimes, especially if you've done the survey and the responses or the feedback you've gotten back wasn't really well, or you didn't have a high response. Take it down a step and start with them. Have the leaders, or if you have a department head, for instance, in that area, or have them have their leaders under them. So it's kind of like building upon that. Start lower and see how those leaders can gather that information, and they can bring it up the ladder and share it that way. Because a lot of times, a lot of employees feel more comfortable sharing. I know some leaders do skip level meetings, and that helps them to get information. So with the skip level, you may have the director, and then you may have a manager. So that director will have one-on-ones with the employees that report to the manager. So also you're able to get more information from the actual individual contributors or those that are under the manager too, to get that different idea. So that can help too. So hope that helps.
Those are great ideas. One I would jump in and add is to be thoughtful about the questions that you ask. It's always important to not ask leading questions, but I think a lot of the times we think that we need to ask really broad, open-ended general questions, which can sometimes be intimidating. So one thing Adam Grant does specifically is, instead of just saying, hey, how did you think that went, which can feel intimidating and you don't know where to start and you might not share your ideas, is say, on a 1 to 5, how would you rate that? Okay, they say a 3. What would bring it to a 5? What was missing? What could have been different? And so by asking something a little bit more specific, it can feel less scary and can invite that more honest feedback.
I love that example. That's a good one too. Great questions. Thank you so much for asking so now we're talking about preparing and implementing. So for preparation, what can you do? You know that we always talk about preparation a lot, right? Preparation really helps us. No matter, almost for anything that we're doing, preparation is so important and really helps us. One thing that I like to share with my clients when we're talking about feedback and giving feedback is do it in your style. We've had some great examples today. We've had some great feedback frameworks that we use. Take those and make them your own, because when it's coming from you and from your style, it really makes a difference. Also, too, the more you prepare, the better you feel when you're giving it. You know exactly what you're going to say. You know, you're not just pulling it out of the sky or going on the fly. It helps you come across better. Practice in the mirror, right? We've all had those times we had a speech to give or something to do. Go stand in front of the mirror and practice it. And then also ask others. You know, don't just give that feedback just to give it. You know, we may think, oh, I have to give feedback, so I'm going to go do this. I know a lot of times with performance, when it comes to performance reviews, that time of year, a lot of people dread that because we know that we're going to give feedback just to give it. But think about maybe the next time you have a one-on-one meeting, or the next time it's time to do a 6-month check-in or end of the year performance review. Think about how you can really make that feedback be meaningful for the individual that you're speaking with. And it was funny, just we went through feedback with a lot of companies this year. And when I had coaching sessions with them, how did it go? I got a lot of positive feedback of how companies are changing that feedback and that end of the year performance review, because they found that just giving it doesn't help the employee. How does it help the employee grow? People want actionable steps. They want to be told how they can grow. So yes, definitely. These are some great preparation steps you can use. Now let's talk about critical feedback principles for a little bit. This is the area where the feedback comes up a lot. You know, we're most of the time we're able to give positive feedback, but it's that critical feedback. So when you look at these, 7 that are listed here, some principles, what resonates with you? I know earlier I asked the question, what characteristics of your ideal feedback is the ideal feedback at your company? So which of these principles, drop the number in the chat. Which ones apply to what you thought about earlier? Which of these might you adopt? I really like 6 and 7. 7 in particular about the tough love, because we know that when we apply tough love or give someone tough love, it's one of the most important types of love we can give, because it's why? It's coming from the heart, right? And when an employee understands and knows that you have their best interest at heart, it really makes a difference, right? It really makes that feedback, when it's critical, easier to accept. What about any of these stand out to you, these 7 principles? 6 was another one that stood out to me, because you're able to really learn about your people. Right, and see how the candid conversations, and when you think about candid, sometimes people refer to it as, just blunt and open, but really not even blunt, but just having an open conversation. Someone mentioned earlier, psychological safety, right? When we're comfortable enough to know that when we receive critical feedback, that it's coming from a good place, right? And more than likely, again, that person giving it, they'd probably rather be anywhere else than in that meeting giving that feedback right then, right? They rather be doing something else or wanting to say something positive, but because they care about your growth, they care about your career path, they want you to be better, they want you to continue to grow, they're going to give you that feedback. Yeah, number 2, someone said they like number 2. Yeah, it really makes you think about it in a different way. It does. So think about some of these the next time you may have to give critical feedback. And it's going to happen. It's going to come up at some point. And it's funny when you think about, maybe you think back to a previous job or a previous boss you had, and how that feedback that you maybe received from that person or from a peer, and how that feedback years later has made a difference in your work or in your life, and how you're so glad. Maybe at the time it wasn't easy to hear, or you maybe didn't appreciate it as much, but then looking back and thinking about it, you thought, see how that feedback has benefited you in your future. So that's really good. Yeah, I like number 2 again. That's a popular one coming up. Understanding where your weaknesses come from. Yes, very good. So let's talk about how coaching can help. Now we've talked about a framework, we talked about wanting to create that culture, we talked about being able to have that. What does coaching do, right? I shared I have some clients I'm definitely working on around this feedback subject. Role playing. When my clients work with me, they know we're going to role play. So we role play these situations. I give them example when they tell me the situation, they prepared, they're ready. So I'm the person that's receiving that feedback. I give them different scenarios of how the person could respond. And then I can't wait till they have that conversation to see what happened. So coaching helps you prepare for that. Coaching gives you a sounding board for you to be able to try different things, see how the message might land. How does it sound? And then you're able to also, with coaching, see how you can build that feedback for your company. Maybe you have some ideas, but you don't know how to go about doing it. Maybe you don't know what action steps to take, or how do I even begin? Well, coaching can help you with all that. It helps you be able to start, implement, create an action plan, all those wonderful things, and then to be able to have those conversations. So let's reflect for a minute. I want you to drop your answers in your chat. How will you know that you've improved your feedback skills? And also, what does success look like for you? That's one of my favorite questions I like to ask, is what does success look like for you? So how will you know if you've improved? Yes, praise and appreciate. Oh, I love it. Less anxiety. That's a big one. That's a really big one. Yes, getting results. Excellent. Yes, and the staff feels safe giving that feedback. That's a big one, because when you as a leader and you're able to receive that feedback and your team feels comfortable bringing that to you, that's wonderful. Yes, more frequency. The more you do it. Yes, cultural change, definitely. Love that. Wow, I think you've got it. You've done a great reflection. So now action, right? What are you going to do? What are you going to commit to? So if you have a piece of paper or anything around, or maybe your phone, what is one thing that you think you could commit to today around feedback? Are you going to practice it a little bit more? What are you going to do? What are you going to commit to? Share in the chat. What action do you want to walk away from committed to doing today? I see a good question that came up. What recommendations can you share? That's a very, very good question. There are a couple of different ways, a couple of things that you can do. The part about even in your existing organization before your arrival, that's a very interesting one that you may have to have a little bit more information around that as a whole to be a little bit more specific in that. But a lot of times with those that have felt marginalized in other sorts of circumstances in other organizations, it's conversations. It starts off with having the open conversations where people feel that they're being heard. Obviously, if they have those feelings of being marginalized or other things that they've experienced in their history of work, they've probably shut off, they've probably shut down, and they don't share, and because they feel like they're not being heard. So it's creating an environment, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But when you have, if you're a leader in this position, really taking that time to have those conversations with your team and letting people feel free to share. And it may not happen. You may have a couple of meetings with your group and people don't share at first. It's still not having that. Maybe it's having those one-on-one conversations with that particular person and then having team conversations where people open up. But one of the most important things is letting them feel safe to share, and they don't be judged and they won't be retaliated against for sharing how they're feeling. And again, creating that psychological safety. So I hope that helps. And if you definitely would like to discuss that a little bit more, please feel free to email or send in the contact form or fill that out or send over your question through email. And I'd love to discuss that a little bit further with you. So definitely please reach out with that and we can discuss that a little bit more. I see some other answers. Patience and listening, communication. Yes. Working on the confidence piece. That's a big piece as well. Yes. Because that uncomfortableness, it's a big deal. So when we have that confidence, it really helps. So the ALV Member team is here to help. These are some of the organizations that we work with, and we would love to be able to come and work with you at your organization and your team to be able to provide more information around feedback or other issues that your company may be dealing with around helping them create that feedback culture or helping them with communication or so many other things that all come into play when it comes to dealing with that feedback culture. So I love this quote and I use it a lot. Great leaders are made. I love this. So you can set you and your team up for success, right? So if maybe it's through one-on-one coaching for your employees, or maybe it's having some leadership training or group coachings for your teams. We would love to do that. So please fill out the link right here that you see and inquire, and someone from our team will contact you and reach out to you to have more discussions around this because it's so important today. Every work has changed in the last 2 years. And so it looks different than what it used to look like, right? And so we all need help to keep on, keeping our sanity for one, and also creating cultures and environments that our employees want to work in, they're excited and they're motivated to be a part of. And we're here to help you create that culture and make sure employees feel safe and want to work at your company. So if there are any other questions, please definitely drop them in the chat and we're here to answer those questions. And I thank you so much for taking time out of your day-to-day to come talk about feedback culture. And I hope that you got some beneficial points that you can apply. And if you need assistance in applying those or getting started, please reach out and let us know.
Thank you so much, Hayley. Any other questions for Hayley before we part? Yes, we will send out the reporting. Absolutely. Thank you for joining. Yeah,
It was
please do click on those links and or reach out to us directly to book a follow-up conversation. This is definitely a topic that deserves more than an hour of discussion. So we'd love to dive in deeper. I say all the time, I talk about leadership principles all day long, and yet leading people is the hardest part of my job. And so absolutely, we need to continue digging in deeper, going through these real scenarios. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. You can contact me personally, Nicole at alvcoaching.com, or tap on one of those links and we'll be in touch. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hayley.
Bye.
Bye.